So what is Dogman? Is it the sequel to Catwoman we've all been waiting for? Let's talk about it now. Hey everyone, it's David Stark from Watcher Pass, and I'm here to talk to you about Dogman, which is coming to select theaters on March 29th, 2024, and then expanding to more theaters probably nationwide on April 5th, 2024. It is a new movie that is written and directed by Luc Besson, and I'm gonna confess, like I didn't know anything about this movie when I went into it. I don't watch trailers, I don't read about films before I started up, so I had no idea what to expect, but I loved this film. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it had some really sharp writing. I thought it was a really kind of interesting concept. And I just loved the character. So as you can tell, I think you should watch it. My hot take is I think you should watch it. I think it is just a really interesting, weird film that has some really sharp writing, some great characters, and a main character that feels kind of like a cross between like the Joker and Kaiser Sose. It is atmospheric. It is very, very weird. But overall, I really enjoyed this film. I was kind of captivated by it. I was captivated by Caleb Landry Jones' performance. So I just really enjoyed this. It's not going to be for everyone. Trust me, it's not going to be for everyone, but it hit the nerves that I liked and I really loved it. So I'm going to tell you a little about the film, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and then really quickly go into the ending. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers in the ending section. If you don't want to know what happened to this movie, and you might not, there are some weird turns. There is some kind of backstory to this character that you don't know about. I would turn it off when I get there. Before that, though, I'll keep it vague. I'll keep it spoiler free, unless you want to get to those spoilers. So in Dogman, you have Douglas Monroe, played by Caleb Landry Jones, who is this kind of quirky, strange, isolated person that has a very traumatic past that led him to a life that kind of isolated him from people, but really let him connect with dogs. And so he seems to have this affinity for dogs. He seems to have this connection with dogs. And this film kind of tells the story of that, of how that came to be, and what he was able to do with the dogs to kind of find peace and also enact some justice. So, all that being said, things I liked about this movie. The first, I love the writing. Like this movie is a lot of conversation. The story is that Dogman is talking to someone about his life, and so there is a lot of conversation. It is very sharp. I love the writing. I love the way that like they played on some words. There were some lines that I really loved. There was something where they're talking about disguises, and the psychologist who was talking to him says that, you know, disguises are usually there to hide things about you that you don't like. And Dogman kind of turns it on his head and he's like, well, I've always found that disguises are there to like let me be someone else for a little bit. Let me kind of like energize myself and be someone else, which is kind of two sides of the same coin, but I really love the dichotomy there. And I love the way that this film had little instances like that throughout. The second thing I love the characters. Look, this is a film about Dogman, and he does a great job. He is kind of quirky, weird, sympathetic, like nuanced. It is a very interesting performance, and Kayla Landry Jones does a great job. That is not taken away from anyone else in the film. Like this film has a lot of good performances, but the central character, the title of the movie is Dogman, and that is the focus. And luckily, Kayla Landry Jones does an amazing job. The third thing I love the soundtrack. It has a great kind of like classical cello filled soundtrack that really helps to kind of set the mood. This is a thriller. This is a movie that has, you know, some mysterious backstory, some darker aspects, and that classical cello really does a great job of setting that mood. And the fourth thing I love the slow build. This is a movie that doesn't tell you much, and especially if you don't know anything about the movie, which I would recommend, it rewards that because you don't know much about Dogman's character. It starts off with you know, him in a situation, and as it progresses, you learn more about him and learn more about the things that he has endured to get to where he is. And I love the fact that, you know, it kind of slowly builds it, it slowly drip feeds that to you. It really kind of lets you learn more and see the interactions before you really fully understand them. I love the way that the story is told. I love when movies have a slow buildup, a kind of a mysterious slow buildup, and this one does it really well. And the last thing I love the weirdness. This is just a weird movie. It is strange. It is quirky. If you are interested in that, if you are interested in kind of like an out there character, some like strange aspects, then you are going to love it. So all that being said, things I didn't love as much. The first, I didn't love I don't know, I'll call it the traumatic backstory. It was necessary. It did kind of help to frame his character, but it felt a little bit more extreme. It felt a little bit, I don't know, it had a callousness to it. It had a religious aspect to it that didn't feel like it was really well fleshed out. It didn't really feel realistic. And look, this is not a realistic movie. This is definitely not a realistic movie, but it felt like the kind of the childhood trauma was a little bit more extreme than even I kind of expected, a little bit more extreme than like reality would have expected. So it didn't hit for me like it should have, but that's okay because the present was really, really well done. And the second thing I didn't love as much, this is kind of more of a neutral. I didn't love the ending, which is really surprising because I love the build up to it. And usually, if a film has a ending I don't like, that tends to kind of tarnish it for me. But this one, I still love the journey to get there. The ending just really didn't hit like I was expecting it to. It wasn't as strong as I was expecting it. It felt almost like it just kind of ended. So I'm not going to go too much into it now. I'm going to go to that in the ending section. But just know I didn't love the ending as much as I was expecting to. So all that being said, Dogman is coming to select theaters on March 29th, 2024, and then more nationwide on April 5th, 2024. Like I said, I think you should watch it. It is just a weird, quirky film. If you like, I don't know, like an A24 kind of movie, this will be right up your alley. So definitely check out Dogman. If you do see it, let me know what you thought. Let me know what you liked and didn't like. I'd love to hear it. And all that being said, I'm going to go into the ending right now. So if you don't know what happened to this movie, I would turn it off now because there will be spoilers. So, like I said, Dogman is a weird movie. It starts with Dogman being pulled over in a truck. He is wearing like he's dressed in drag. He has like makeup on, like heavy, heavy white makeup, like Joker-esque kind of makeup. He has like a dress that is a little bit kind of like tattered and dirty. His car is full of dogs. He is very calm and confident when the cops pull him over, and he tells them like, the dogs will be fine as long as you don't hurt me. And that's how this movie starts. The police apparently take him to the station. They book him. They don't really know what to do with him, though, because they're not sure. Generally, they're not sure which holding cell to put him in, the women or the men, because he is a person, but he's dressed in drag. They're not sure which way to go. So they call in a psychologist to come and like talk to him and dig in and figure out which one to go. That is the basis of this whole movie. And as she starts talking to him, their conversation delves into some aspects of Dogman's life and some of the crimes that he has committed in order to kind of make peace with those aspects and kind of survive in this world. So they start talking, and we find out that Dogman had a very traumatic childhood. His father was just an angry person. He organized dog fights. That's how he would make a living. But he terrorized his family. He terrorized Dogman's mom. He terrorized the house. His brother, Richie, I think, was kind of his father's crony. He would rat on, things that his little brother was doing, rat on stuff to kind of like get favor. And this eventually caused Dogman, whose name is Douglas, but I'll call him Dogman throughout, to get thrown in the pen with the dogs. I think it was found that he was sneaking food to the dogs, and his father got really upset because the dogs being starved is kind of what makes them want to fight, what makes them want to do dog fights. And so his father said basically like, "Oh, you're choosing those dogs over your family, you're choosing your dogs over your way of living, so you can be with them. You've chosen them." And so for this one indiscretion, he throws him in the pen and leaves him there permanently, which again, that felt fairly extreme. But in there, Douglas or Dogman was able to kind of like find the companionship from the dogs that he was missing from his family. The dogs kind of embraced him. He became part of their pack, and that is where he stayed for a while. Now, his mother eventually left. I guess she got pregnant again and didn't want to bring another child into this terrible, terrible situation. So she just left. But after she left, Richie found a secret stash of magazines that his mother had kind of hidden. And those magazines were Modern Women and like an American magazine. So he kind of learned about society, learned about life through those magazines, which is probably one of the kind of like starting points for why he eventually started, embracing drag and embracing cross-dressing later on in his life. But that is kind of how he learned about society and learned about kind of life, was through those magazines. Eventually, one of the dogs had puppies, and Richie was caring for it, but he didn't want his father to see because I think his father was going to either like raise the puppies to fight or kill them. But his brother Richie saw that and went and like tattled on him, like went to tell his dad. His dad came out and was gonna kill those puppies. I don't know why. They didn't really explain why, but maybe his dad was just mean. Douglas didn't want that. He wanted to protect his dog, so he stood there and stood in his dad's way, so he couldn't get in and kill those dogs. Well, his dad had a shotgun, his dad or some sort of gun, and his dad eventually shot him. It seemed like it was an accident because he didn't shoot him like in the chest. He shot him. That shot hit his finger, hit Richie's finger, took his finger off, and then also ricocheted off the back wall and hit him in the spine. So the guy didn't kill the dogs, but he did permanently injure Richie. He Richie could no longer walk after that, or at least could barely walk after that. And so this was kind of the final straw. This left a hole in the cage. And so Richie sent one of the dogs out to go and like get help. He put his finger in a plastic bag, gave it to the dog, said, "Go find a police car." Because at this point, apparently Richie can like communicate with dogs. And so he tells the dog to go find the police officer. The dog goes and finds a police officer with the bag, leads him back. And then you find this house of horrors, and the police take Richie off to social services. Now, his dad eventually went, his dad was going to go to prison, but he committed suicide. And his brother got 8 years in prison, but Douglas got his justice later. So at some point, when his brother got out of prison, apparently he had a dog watching, waiting for his brother to get out, and he used the dogs to enact his revenge on his brother. It doesn't really show it, but they corner him. You hear some screaming, you hear some ripping. It sounds like Douglas was able to get some revenge on Richie. But before that, Douglas went to a kind of like house for kids, a social services house, where he picked up theater from this theater teacher who was really, really nice to him. Like this his first crush, the first person that like believed him, and she taught him Shakespeare, and that let him kind of get out of his shell and act and be in front of people and learn something different, something that would like let him leave the library where he would read books constantly because he didn't want to be around the kids. He was in a wheelchair. He had these like braces on his leg. He was already a little bit antisocial because he didn't really see kids growing up. So this let him get out of his shell, let him kind of stretch that aspect, and he loved it. Now, eventually, that teacher went away. Richie followed her career, made this beautiful scrapbook of everything that she'd done. She eventually made it to Broadway. And there's this heart-wrenching scene when Douglas does finally meet her in Broadway after her big show. She recognizes him. She is so happy to see him. She gives him a kiss. And then he meets her husband. It is soul-crushing for him because he put so much on this. This was his first love. And he got his heart broken again. But that is not the whole point of this movie. This is just one of the things that kind of led Douglas to where he is now. Now, Douglas has always had an affinity for dogs, especially spending his time out there. So he eventually was able to like communicate with them and actually communicate with them, like train them, talk to them. They became his companions. Now, he was running a dog shelter. That was kind of the perfect job for him, but that eventually got shut down. So now that his shelter is shut down, he he moves into this like abandoned school where he takes his dogs, he's able to live there, but he needs money. He's not getting money from the state. He's not getting money from like adoptions and donations from his shelter. So he has to find a job. He looks everywhere, but look, he's a little bit quirky. He is in a wheelchair. He can't stand for a long time. He doesn't really find a job anywhere until he randomly goes into a theater looking for a job and sees like a drag performance happening. And he is just captivated by this. I think he loves, the idea of putting on a new face, of putting on a disguise. Like he said when he was talking to the therapist, like putting on a disguise lets you kind of be that person for a little bit. It doesn't cover your flaws, like she was saying. It lets you kind of like embrace someone new. And so he is enthralled by this. The manager doesn't really want to give him a shot, but all the drag queens in there, they are super supportive. They see, him trying. They're like, "Oh, give him a shot. Just give him like one time." And he tells him like he can recite Shakespeare, he can sing like old vaudeville songs, so he can do something. He gets one performance and he gets one night, like one performance on Friday, and he sings this like old French song in this like powerful style. It is a really, really amazing performance. And you have to remember, he can barely walk. Like he has braces that let him stand for a while, but he takes those off, to not kind of ruin the mystique. So he can just stand there for about 3 minutes. And so he is like struggling to stand, but also trying to put on a performance and just embracing this whole thing. And that got enough support that he was able to then do that every Friday. He had one slot every Friday. That was part of his job. Wasn't enough, but it was something that he loved doing. He loved getting ready for it. He loved being up there on the stage. It probably reminded him of, his happy times with his teacher before she broke his heart. So he does that. Now he also has to find other means for making a living. And so he trains his dogs to go steal from wealthy people. They like sneak in, they break in, take jewelry, take things like that, and leave and give it to him. He's able to sell it, and that is how he's able to support his life. Seems like a pretty perfect crime. Like who would suspect a dog? But someone does. There's an insurance adjuster who follows all these videos, but eventually figures out that the dogs are doing this. And also he's able to see some footage of Douglas in this van. He puts it together and he eventually tracks Douglas down. Now, he first approaches him at his show and pretends to be a fan, asks him to dinner. Douglas declines. He says he has to get home. And that insurance adjuster follows him back. And that is when he threatens him and says, "Give me all the money. Give me all the things that you've stolen." Doug's like, "Sure. Like, I don't do this for money. I do this to like support my family, but like, I don't care about the money." So he gives him the jewelry. And I couldn't tell. I think this insurance adjuster was going to take this and sell it and keep it for himself. I couldn't tell if he was like really into his job or if he thought this would be a way to like get a quick payday. I think it was that one. I think he was getting a quick payday. I don't get the sense that he was doing this specifically because he believed in the company and believed in his job. It felt like he was going to steal from Douglas to then take that wealth and like, use it. But it's possible. He did say like something about like giving it back to the ladies, the people that was stolen from. So I'm not sure. But so after he gets that money, he sits down and Douglas says, would you like some dinner? And for some reason, the insurance adjuster says okay. He sits down, and when he sits down, this couch that he's on seems to have two very kind of ornamental pillows. They look at him. It turns out that they are actually dogs. They're like the rug or they're like the mop looking dogs. And that is when he realizes that he is in over his head. The dogs attack him. Problem solved. I guess Douglas is able to keep the money, and this insurance adjuster doesn't kind of make the case. But that isn't the reason that they eventually caught him. So what happened is Douglas also was doing favors for people in the neighborhood in order to like upgrade this place. He did a favor for someone, and they installed cameras in his house. And one of the people that they did a favor for, Marta, she was getting kind of shaken down for extortion money, for protection money, and they kept taking more and more. So Douglas used his dogs to convince the boss of this gang to stop hurting Marta. This was interesting because I'm surprised he did just Marta. He thinks like he probably should have done like stop taking money from everyone or stop raising your rates. But he said specifically, don't collect from Marta. He had that guy in a pretty compromising situation with his dog. The dog had a very important piece of that person's body ready to bite. And so the gang leader agrees. Now, this clearly probably causes some ire. And eventually that gang leader tracks him down and comes to the high school. He brings an army, but unfortunately for him, DogMan has an army of dogs, and they seem to have this place rigged. So there is this kind of like big action sequence where those gang members come in and try to like take over this place, and the dogs attack them, use traps, things like that. Douglas gets involved as well, knowing like the secret corridors and things like that. It is like a very interesting kind of like horror aspect because when they're approaching, you'll see a dog run across the hallway and go into a little hole, and someone like follows them, and then they get pulled in from a dog, or they'll be walking through, and then like a saw like trap will happen. It is fun. It is interesting. It is kind of like shows you how like clever these dogs are, and also kind of how clever Douglas is. But eventually, he's able to fight them all off. But this clearly is going to cause some commotion. There's gunfire. There's a lot of bodies, and so that is where the cops get involved. That is where Douglas realizes that he has to leave, and so that's when he packs up. That's when he tries to leave. He gets pulled over by the cops, and that is what started this whole dog man thing. Now, the psychologist is talking to him throughout this, trying to like get more information about him, and then she just gets intrigued by his story and starts learning more and more about him. Eventually, though, she leaves because they've had their conversation. He says it was very nice to talk to you. He thought it was very helpful, and so she ends up leaving. And this is when Douglas kind of hatches his master plan. He doesn't want to be in this prison. He doesn't really want to be in this cage. He's been in a cage for a long time when he was a kid. Doesn't want to be in a cage anymore. And so he breaks out. He has one of the dogs knock out one of the cops, takes their keys. He gets all dressed up. He gets into like his best. He opens the door, tries to leave, but when he's trying to leave, this police station apparently isn't like handy accessible because there are some stairs, and he's in a wheelchair. He tries to get out. He can't get up. So what does he do? He stands up and walks out. Now, like he said, he could walk for short periods of time. He does walk a little bit throughout the film, but that bullet that was lodged in his spine that took his legs is also kind of like a death sentence. He can walk, but when he does it, there's a risk that that bullet is going to move or lodge somewhere else and like I guess leak marrow into his bloodstream, which is apparently very bad for you. So he walks out of the station painfully. He also got shot a couple times during that raid, so he is in pain already, and it's already tough for him to move. So he is walking. He walks out of that station, and in front of him you see a church. And there was this like religious aspect to his upbringing where his brother Richie would like tell him he had to confess, tell him he had to like repent, and he did seem to have a little bit of like a religious aspect. He would say things like, whether it's God's plan or like talk about faith. It wasn't fully fleshed out, so that's why it was a little bit weird to have this person who like clearly had some terrible things happen in his life have like a pseudo strong faith but not really bring it up. But in any event, he sees this church ahead and starts walking towards it. He walks into like the shadow of this church's cross, and he stands in that shadow and he says, "Here I am standing for you." And then a bunch of the dogs like come around him, not just his dogs, but dogs all over. And then he says, I'm ready. And then he collapses on the ground, surrounded by dogs. The dogs all kind of like lay down around him. And you hear the dogs crying out. The therapist in her home hears these dogs crying out as you hear like a police car coming. You only see Douglas collapse. You don't see what happens after, but the assumption is that this was kind of like the final bullet, I guess, for lack of a better term. He finally moved enough that that bullet probably dislodged some marrow and like is poisoning him. So that's why he ended up collapsing. It could just be because he's exhausted. That could be that as well. He had a long night. But I think this is more of a permanent end to him. But the therapist hears the dogs crying. She goes, she looks outside her window, and outside her window is one of his dogs watching her. So it seems like either it seems like maybe he sent a dog to protect her, or is this a coincidence? It's just a random dog. But I think it's Douglas sending a dog to protect her, to like watch over her. He and the therapist had a pretty nice connection. He said that they were like connected through a commonality, which was pain. They both had a lot of pain in their lives, and so he was able to connect with her. So I think that that is what happened. I think Douglas is probably dead. His dogs are mourning him, but they will probably continue to fulfill his wishes. I don't know who's going to take care of them without him. I guess we will see. Maybe they'll go back to that high school and just kind of like live there and live their lives. But who knows? That is Dogman. Like I said, it's really interesting. Like Caleb Andrew Jones' character is just so kind of perplexing and so interesting. He does seem like a cross between like the Joker and Kaiser Soze because he clearly has a lot going on. He clearly knows a lot, but he's a little quirky. His Jokerness is like the paint and also like the way he answers questions, the way he kind of like is so calm in this really weird situation. So I was fascinated by it. I thought it was a really great performance. I loved the movie overall. So like I said, it's not gonna be for everyone, but this does sound appealing to you. If like a weird movie or like a dark-ish kind of movie does sound appealing to you, then I would check it out. I think you might like it. So check out Dogman. It comes to theaters on March 29th, 2024 in select theaters, and then it goes wider release April 5th, 2024. And let me know what you think. Let me know what you liked and didn't like. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.